Good evening, everyone. It sounds so surprising that we have already reached the last session of our workshop. To me, it appears as if we had just started and we are already now in the concluding session of this workshop. And for this session today, we have Professor Srinivas Vishnu Bhatla, who's a professor of biostatistics at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. And he's one of those biostatisticians I have met in my lifetime or my career who can come down to the level of a clinician and speak to them in the language that a clinician can understand. Most times it is very difficult to communicate with statisticians, and you end up in research that never sees the light of the day. In the end of the product is never there. Dr. Srinivas is one such person who has got the acumen, the talent, and also the enthusiasm to talk to clinicians and bring things to a logical conclusion. Without wasting much time, let's launch into this session on meta-analysis. And for me, this topic is very new because I have done systematic reviews and meta-analysis, but the analysis or the statistics of meta-analysis is something which I also do not understand completely. And let me invite Professor Srinivas. The stage is all for you. We have the participants. They will keep joining in. They're all faculty members in different medical institutions. And some medical students have joined in for the session today on meta-analysis because they were working on one or the other meta-analysis and they requested. But most of the participants are themselves faculty members engaged in research. Welcome, Dr. Srinivas, and all yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Okay. So meta-analysis as such is a statistical tool, and which is part of a bigger concept called systematic review. So I thought it is appropriate to talk about briefly what is the systematic review, and then slowly move into meta-analysis, where we can be more specific with example and type of things. So that I have taken the liberty of changing the title from meta-analysis to systematic review and meta-analysis. So by this time, you all must be knowing, before you embark on any study, any whatsoever it is, you should justify why you are doing, why it is worthwhile, what you propose to do, and how you are going to enhance or adding to the body of knowledge that is already available. In other words, how you build on the experience already gained from the previous research. So in this process, we all need to summarize the previous works and what we call a review of literature. So, and this review, you know, by this time, it is a narrative or descriptive review, or the concept called systematic review. And these narrative descriptive reviews were more traditional, and they had a lot of limitations because basically they were subjective and prone to bias and error, and they were not reproducible because people, if you are doing a review, whatever you know the work, whatever you have an impression, one can try to conclude in the way, the manner in which one had his or her own individual impressions. So that's how they were prone to bias and error. And because of that, you know, if you say something, another reviewer on the same topic led to another conclusion. So this type of things were there. These are limitations. And besides that, the issue of sample size, the effect size, the design of the study were not at all considered into the review. And as I said, one review contradicts another review, and so the conclusions were unreliable. Because of these disadvantages of these narrative or descriptive reviews, the focus has been increasingly on formal methods of reviewing studies, which are based on more objective appraisal of the whatever available evidence, and formulated methods which are explicit, and more importantly, you can reproduce, whether you do or I do or anybody else does, you get the same result. That's the advantage. And there's an up-to-date summary. You have some studies as of today, you can meta-analyze and come out with a result. And after 1 year, 2 years, some more studies have come, you can update the summary, adding to the whatever recent literature that has come up. So the systematic reviews are like any other research project. They have to be carefully planned, and you should have a detailed protocol specifying what is the research question, what is the a priori definition of eligibility criteria for to include a particular study or a trial, the comprehensive strategy that you adopt, including the keywords and mesh terms and so on and so forth, and assessment of methodological quality of each trial, and should ideally, this is important, should ideally be conceived by a group of reviewers with expertise in both content area and the research methodology. Because people used to think, at least my experience, I have seen many very enthusiastic residents used to say, sir, I can produce a paper by doing meta-analysis. So I used to laugh and say, it has to be, you should have expertise both in content area and methodology. This is not just producing, some numbers and feeding into the computer and getting an output and trying to publish. It is not like that. This is a misconception. The persons who are proposing to do the systematic review should have expertise both in content area as well as methodology. Then, what are the steps in a systematic review? You should have you should formulate what is a review question as such, number one. And like any other study, what is the review question or objective or aim? Define inclusion exclusion criteria, locate the studies, and select studies, assess study quality, extract data, analyze and present, and finally interpret the results. When you formulate a review question, this is again, it should be specified in simple and unambiguous words. This is like any study planning. I'm just quickly taking you through so that to keep the continuity. Inclusion exclusion criteria should include definition of who is a study participants and interventions, comparisons, like your PCOT criteria, PCOS criteria, study participants, interventions, comparison, outcome, study design, or time, like that. PCOT criteria, like any other study, you should have this. Then when you want to locate the studies, you have to have a search strategy defining the, specifying the indexing terms and the databases like Medline and Base, Cochrane Control Trials Register, conference proceedings, hand searching key journals, hand search of reference lists, personal communications with experts, seniors in the field, and other sources like clinical trial registries, theses, dissertations, and so on. Now, when you want to when you are selecting studies, it's always helpful to have the eligibility checked by more than one observer, because again, you may have at a subconscious level, you may be biased to include or exclude a particular study which is not in tune with your thinking or impressions. So it is better to have the eligibility checked by more than one observer and develop a strategy to resolve the disagreements. You can have, if two people are doing, if there is some disagreement to include or not to include a study, you can have a third person who is an arbitrator type. You can have a more senior person as to resolve the disagreements, and keep a log of excluded studies with reasons why you have excluded such a study. Then another important point is why this is important, I will tell you later. Assessing the study quality, because each study is not of equal quality. So the assessment of the quality of the study again should be done by more than one person. And how do you assess the quality of the study? There are some checklists, some quality scales, and these are all readily available in, for example, Cochrane site. If you see, there are detailed information is available. But what is important in this quality assessment is whether, if you are referring to trials, whether the how the treatment allocation is conceived. That is important. And whether blinding was there. If it is there, how it is implemented. And patient attrition. It's very easy to, we have that patient, a particular patient who deteriorated, we have withdrawn the patient. So it is not included in the analysis. So patient attrition is accounting for it is very important. So 3 important issues when you are assessing the quality of a trial: how the treatment allocation is concealed till the implementation, blinding, whether it is there, if it is there, how they have ensured that it is properly implemented, and patient attrition, how they have handled in the analysis. So again, consider blinding of observers to authors, because as I said, you may like certain authors, you may like certain institutions. So consider you may blind the data collection persons who are collecting the data, should be, if possible, blind to the authors and institutions and even journals. So these are some of the, as I said, tools for assessing the study quality. You have JEDAD score from the Oxford group, GRADE working group, and Newcastle Ottawa scale. These are scales which you can use and grade every study. And then it may be useful in the analysis. If you have too much of heterogeneity, you may have to do a subgroup analysis. I will remove whose studies of poor quality. But that again, you should have, as far as possible, a priori defined. Okay, so these will be useful at a later stage when you have to explain why the results are so heterogeneous. Okay, then extracting data, you again, as I said, like any other study, you have to design a data extraction form, pilot test the data extraction form, again consider data extraction by more than one observer, and again blinding of observers to authors, institutions, and journals. Here, don't get confused with the blinding implemented in the study that you are including. And when I say blinding here, the blinding of you, when the systematic reviewer, blinding from which journal you are taking that article, who is the author, and all. So there are 2 aspects. Don't get confused with the blinding implemented in the actual study. That is different. This is for the data collection. As a systematic reviewer, you have to consider. Then you, after collection of the data, you tabulate the results from individual studies, examine what we call a forest plot, which we will talk about in a few slides later, explore possible sources of heterogeneity, and consider meta-analysis of all studies or subgroup of studies, perform some sensitivity analysis, make a list of excluded studies available for those with reasons for the interested readers. Now, interpretation, I'll let me finish off, and then we will go through today. I'm sure it is already circulated. All of you must have gone through at least once, so that you feel comfortable in what I am trying to say. Or if you have any doubt, as Dr. Goel has said, you can stop me, and we can then and there itself we can discuss. Yeah, when you come to the interpretation of results, consider the limitations, including publication and related biases. Well, how strong is the evidence? What is its applicability in your local setting? And consider the number needed to treat or to benefit or harm. For example, we are talking of these COVID vaccines now. Somebody says 70%, somebody says 90%. For example, if it's 70% of the Bharat Biotech vaccine, if you translate it into a number needed to treat, it is about 500. To prevent one COVID infection, you have to vaccinate more than 500 people. So that is the real, no, just saying 70% efficacy, 90% efficacy is a very, what I would say in the ratio terms, but real for public health or clinical implications, practical implications, number needed to treat for to benefit or harm is very useful. So even if you do the meta-analysis, the translational point of view in terms of the number needed to treat or to benefit or harm should always be explained. And what are its economic implications for that? For example, if you say to prevent one COVID case, then infection, if you have to vaccinate 500, more than 500 people, what are the costs? What are the implications? You know, and then what is the implication for this result for future research? Whether further work is necessary or not necessary. The question has been answered conclusively by this meta-analysis, and so on and so forth. Okay, so after the data is collected and the evidence from different studies is pooled to arrive an overall summary estimate of effect, and the statistical methods to combine this is what is called meta-analysis. What all we have said is the systematic review. So after seeing your data presented in a tabular form and in a forest plot, now you have a fair idea, is it worth combining? If the results are so disparate, different studies giving different types of results, you may even think of not proceeding for meta-analysis. So that's only when you think it is worthwhile meta-analysis, now you should think of doing an overall summary pooled estimate. That's what. So, and this overall combining statistical method to combine is what is called meta-analysis. It is a quantitative tool that can be used to summarize information from many studies. And what is this rationale for this meta-analysis? Because most often many trials are carried out on similar populations using similar interventions and with common outcome measures. So, and many trials are too small and the results have wide confidence intervals. So you can't rely on the results of an individual study. And further, small studies produce contradictory results also. Therefore, combining results from different studies to produce an overall summary estimate would be useful. That's the rationale for a meta-analysis. Now, how does it help? Because you have increased total size of the combined analysis, increases the chance of detecting a moderately large result, but clinically or epidemiologically important result. And results based on a wide spectrum of patients and different setups with different case mix, the results are likely to have more external validity or generalizability. That's the advantage of doing a meta-analysis. Now, the aims of meta-analysis is not just getting a pooled summary, different studies, put it in a mixie and press the budget type, and get one mixed. It's not like that. That's no doubt the one purpose. Most useful, this overall effect, treatment effect is most useful when we have several studies performed in similar populations using similar interventions and common outcome measures, each of which is too small, underpowered to show practically important difference in the outcome of interest, number one. The other important aspect, which many people don't realize, or a bit of it requires one step more expertise in explaining heterogeneity, why the results are dissimilar. So if you can explain why different studies are showing different results, that's the it will enhance your understanding of the concept, the topic that you are trying to review. So when the results are very dissimilar, the best knowledge can be gained from trying to understand why the studies may have arrived at disparate results. This is what is the benefit of actual meta-analysis. Okay, so the importance of meta-analysis, you can see this is the what is called the pyramid of the evidence. Again, there are different versions for this pyramid, but I have taken one that is available from Real Science. You can see at the bottom, the lowest quality of evidence is background information, expert opinion, non-evidence-based medicine guidelines, followed by individual case reports and case series and studies like observational studies like your cross-sectional and case control. Then cohort studies will come further up, a bit stronger evidence. Then further up, non-randomized control trials, then randomized control trials. Then further up, you have the bottom line is background. Next 3 lines are the observational studies, then experimental studies. Then you have critical appraisal, critically appraised literature, evidence-based practice guidelines. Further up is systematic, and the topmost highest evidence is what is called meta-analysis. That's how the meta-analysis importance in literature, what do you call, synthesis of different studies, and conclusive evidence comes from meta-analysis of well-planned, double-blind clinical trials. That's the highest evidence, strongest evidence. And now, what is the data of interest for a meta-analysis? It could be summary measure of each trial or study. But when you are dealing with binary data, it could be risk difference or number needed to treat. They are very simple, easy to interpret. But the problem with them is they're not very consistent across different studies. So generally, meta-analysis is not attempted on risk difference or number needed to treat. What do? They use the relative measures like odds ratio, risk ratio. These are the common measures that are used for meta-analysis, which can be again a pooled odds ratio or a pooled risk ratio can be converted into NNT and all. That's later at the time of interpretation. But carrying out the meta-analysis, for that sake, most often use ratio measures, risk ratio and odds ratio, hazards ratio type. If you are dealing with quantitative data, it could be mean difference. It could be a difference of how much a weight gain was there with a supplementary diet versus a normal diet. What is the difference? That type of a thing. Mean difference or standardized mean difference. If you have the units of measurement are different in different studies, you can standardize. That's nothing but difference divided by the standard deviation of the difference. And it could be even correlation coefficient. We are dealing with quantitative data. These are the summary measures one can use for a meta-analysis. Now, variation among different studies. This is the real charm or the gist of meta-analysis. The variation, if it is due to chance only, that means if you presume, if you are doing a treatment A versus B anywhere in the world, the effect is common for all these studies in the world. And what are differences are coming? Because they are because of sampling only. If you think that is what is called, it is chance error due to only different sampling error only. But there can be other errors, systematic errors due to clinical diversity. It could be study location, setting, the background, background immune capacity or of a person, like persons like us. We are exposed to a lot of, being in a temperate, hot, humid climate. We are already exposed to a lot of background infections. So you are already immune compared to a very clean society like Sweden or Finland, So that same medicine or a treatment may have a different effect for a society like ours as against a society like a Finland or Switzerland, Sweden type of thing. So that is what when we say study location and setting, and the age or gender of the person's inclusion exclusion criteria, what diagnostic techniques used, or disease severity of the participants, dose or intensity of the intervention, and the outcomes definitions. So these are things which can cause, bias or heterogeneity in different studies results. So the systematic errors due to methodological diversity, again, study design. Somebody can use a matched case control study. Somebody may do an unmatched case control study. See, these are things, somebody may do a blinded trial, somebody may do an open label trial. So these are, and quality, again, study quality. So these are things which can lead to systematic errors also. So if you presume that the errors, whatever variation is there in different studies, it is because of purely sampling error, then we call it the studies are homogeneous. But if you think the errors can be due to systematic errors also, which is most often, there is heterogeneity. So this is, again, there are methods to assess the heterogeneity. We will see that further. So how to know when whether the different studies are homogeneous or heterogeneous? A forest plot, first thing, it will tell you how the different studies effects are scattered around the center line or the common effect. If they are too much spread on both directions, then a lot of heterogeneity, obviously. And you have statistical tests for heterogeneity. There is a Q statistic, and from that one can derive another measure called I-square. This Q statistic is not very reliable, especially when you have smaller number of studies, but most often used is the consistency measure, what is called I-square. So I will just show you these concepts by a data, published data by Bellamy et al. In BMJ, preeclampsia and risk of cardiovascular disease and cancer in later life, systematic review and meta-analysis, 2007, yes, 2007 published article. So this is the data as of that 2006 or so. The authors could locate 13 studies, trials. Each study, the author, the hypertension in preeclampsia, 40 out of 53 by Adams et al. 1961 versus control 21 out of 185, gave a risk ratio of 6.65 and with a confidence interval of 4.32 to 10.23, like that. This is the basic raw data that is required for a meta-analysis. Now, how you arrived at this 13, why not 23, why out of the 60? These are the things which are part of systematic review. You have to say why you included, why you have excluded, how you have included, with what criteria. That's all part of systematic review. Once if you cross and arrive at these 13 numbers, pooling these 13 results and getting a common estimate is what is meta-analysis. Okay, so what is forest plot? It's just the x-axis indicates the magnitude of the effect of each study. The x-axis shows the magnitude of the study. If you are talking of risk ratio, it could be risk ratio. And every study is indicated on the y-axis. Effect of each study is depicted as a square with its 95% confidence interval as whiskers. So the area of the square reflects the weight of the study given to that. I mean, if that weight comes later slightly, you can for the time park that issue. So what is that square? But the point is, x-axis shows the effect from each side, and y-axis shows each study. And the effect is shown as along with its confidence interval represented as whiskers. And the effect size will be that box size. We will come to that slightly later. See, the null value, what is called an odds ratio or risk ratio, is 1, shown in the middle as the null value, and the combined line is shown as the combined value is also shown. The overall pooled estimate is also shown as a line. So this is the meta-analysis of those 13 studies. can I use, you can see the pointer? Okay, fine. So for example, this Adams 1961, the risk ratio is 6.65. That is shown as this point, confidence interval as whiskers, and this box size is the weight given to this study, 12.8% weight. We will come to that slightly later. And the more the weight, the bigger the box. For example, this Hannaford 1997 has got a 15% weight, 15.6, slightly bigger. And this study, you see, got only 1.28% weight. That's why the box size is small with wider confidence interval. So, and this is the null line with risk ratio 1. And this is the pooled dotted line is the pooled estimate, which is 3.8 with its confidence interval. This. And now weights, you just see this. Okay, random effects analysis, we'll come to that. You see the overall I square is 78% with the p-value highly significant. So this is what is the forest plot, which will tell you the gist of the whatever you have included studies, how they appear. And with this, with overall estimate, overall effects, this thing with the diamond. This is what is called a diamond in the forest of woods. So it is called forest plot. Okay. So what is this showing? It allows us to see the information from individual studies, no doubt, provides a simple visual representation of amount of variation among results of different studies. You see, this is showing this side, this is showing here, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, or perhaps 4, 5 studies showing very high estimates, and 3, 4 studies showing lower side, smaller effect size. So it gives a just a bird's eye view of the different studies results and a visual representation of the different studies effect sizes. And it also gives you a view of the overall treatment effect against the individual estimates. That is what is called a diamond in the forest of woods. Then this is what is I square, how you calculate. It's a what you calculate is Cochrane's Q, and from this Q, I square is derived. You need not bother about this calculation because softwares take care of that. What it measures is the extent of inconsistency among the results from different studies. And it is interpreted approximately as the proportion of total variation in study estimates that is due to heterogeneity rather than sampling error. So it ranges from 0 to 100%. 0 means absolutely no heterogeneity, which will never be the case. And large I square means high heterogeneity. And anyway, some heterogeneity is expected. So practically anything I square more than 50% is suggestive of heterogeneity. Below 50% is considered to be heterogeneity is very minimal. And this is what the Q statistic, and from this the I square is derived. Skip this. Yeah. Now, then there are again methods to have a combined effect. A combined effect, how to estimate it? There are methods. After careful consideration and only if meta-analysis is deemed fit. That's what you had after seeing the forest plot. If you think it is worthwhile to combine, then only you should have this overall effect. Otherwise, simply show the results with wide variation, and based on that you can conclude that it's a lot of heterogeneity is there, so no point in combining. And then you either you can say depending on further evidence is required, or all further large studies are required, and so on and so forth. But what is the this pooled combined effect? Simply pooling data across introduces bias and confounding. So you cannot simply pool the results and take an average type of a thing, because it is a lot of confounding effects and bias will be creeping in. Unit must always be a trial when combining data. As I said, arithmetic mean is appropriate, weighted is average. To give you the why the arithmetic mean, for example, let's say what we should say, your group involves, let's say, 15 persons, of which, let's say, 10 are ladies and 5 are male. And what is the average experience of the group person? If you have a typical person in this group, if you want to say, let's say, all the females have 8 years experience, and let's say all males have only 5 years experience. So if you take simply 8 plus 5 by 2, it is 6.5. Is it correct? No. So what you have to do, the 10 people, because the females forming a larger group have a higher experience. So there they contribute 80 years there, and here 5 males with 5, it is 25. 105 divided by 50. That's what it is. What we mean by arithmetic mean is inappropriate, weighted average is appropriate. Okay. So there's a concept called fixed effects and random effects. A fixed effects model is when you say the effect, wherever it is done in the world, whoever it does, it is fixed. The effect, whatever variation is there, it is because of sampling only. Then we say it's a fixed effect. And that's what it is suitable if homogeneity is present. And between study variation is assumed to be due to chance alone. Okay. And how you calculate the weights? Inverse variance method. If there are large variation, inverse of it, so it will that such a study will get smaller weight. Mantel-Hansel method, which is also, it give a large study will get larger weight, and small study will get smaller weight. There is another method called Peto's method. There are 3 methods. Most often we use the inverse variance method. Yeah, this inverse variance method is the if in fixed effects. So this is a bit of technical details, how the weights are calculated. Larger studies will get larger weight because they have smaller standard errors. So, and this minimizes the variability of the pooled estimate, and it is widely applied. If the study is small, the sample size is small, the standard error will be large, and the inverse of it, so the study will get a smaller weight. So smaller study will get a smaller weight, larger study will get a larger weight. That is what is inverse variance method. When you think this is the fixed effects is not tenable because of different sources of bias, you presume which is more practical, you assume the effect is random. You may have a Indian setup, you will have a certain effect size. When you move to a Nordic country, you may have one type of effect. If you go to a Latin American country, you may have a different effect of the same intervention for the same condition. But because the background conditions and all, you may have a different effect size. So we presume that it is not fixed all over the world or all in all studies. So that's what when we say there is heterogeneity, we assume a different underlying effect for each study. For example, if a particular study is done in Delhi, we presume it is representative of India, but it is not representative of a study from Canada. That's how any Indian study will have one type of common effect. So, but it's entirely, it could be different from an Australian continent or North American continent, So every study has, the studies are heterogeneous. So what we do in this is you give a slightly relatively higher weight for small studies. It is not higher weight for smaller studies, mind you. It's a relatively higher weight to smaller studies with wider CA as compared to fixed effects. If fixed effects gives a smaller study for 1.5% weight, Random effects may give 1.6, 1.7, nothing more. So you don't get the impression that random effects gives higher weights, bigger weights for smaller studies. No. Compared to fixed effects, slightly higher. If it is given a 1.5% weight for a particular study in fixed effects, random effects will give 1.6, and still it is smaller than a larger study's weight. That underlying principle will remain same. So that's what. And these weights calculation, most popular method is what is called Dersimonian-Laird method, DL method. Okay, this is the method. The weights are calculated in a random effects model. Okay, so now this is the data output. You can see example of the same preeclampsia and risk of hypertension in later life. This is the tabular representation. Every study with the risk ratio, 95% confidence interval, the percentage weight. You see the last line, you see D plus L pooled RR, Dersimonian-Laird method. So this is what is a random effects model. If you do this with the fixed effect, here it is, for example, a small study, Hannaford is, Livori is 1.28% here. With the fixed effects, it may be 1.26. That's all, nothing more than that. Slightly more weight given for smaller studies relative to fixed effect. That's the only difference. And you can see heterogeneity chi-square. From that, you have I-square derived, which is 78.0%. And tau square is another measure, but most often we use these I-square. And so this is, and the overall R risk ratio is significant. That is 3.799 is statistically significant from the null value of 1. So this is the data output of meta-analysis. And
excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
So if the I-square value is high, so does that mean that the data is so heterogeneous that we should not be doing a meta-analysis?
No. It only increases your work, saying what could be the source of heterogeneity. Is it because of you can see one study is, for example, that's what I said. No? Your forest plot will tell most often one study is showing on the left side, let's say here somewhere this side, and every study. So that's an outlier. So you can do a sensitivity analysis. If I exclude that study, what happens? Okay, we will come to that. But definitely meta-analysis should not be done, is not a conclusion to be taken. We will tell how to deal with that. We will come to that. So this is what the forest plot. And same thing what we have seen in a tabular form is shown here. Overall, the diamond is here, 3.8 with confidence interval. Weights are from random effects analysis. You see, this is the pooled effect, and this is the null value or risk ratio 1. And these are the individual study results, and this is the weight given to every study. Total of weights is 100%. Now, what can we do with heterogeneity? If there's too much of heterogeneity, maybe you go back to your data collection sheet, check the data, whether you have collected, whether incorrect extraction is there, number 1. And bypass it. The another way is, if you are taking risk ratio, you take risk difference. So sometimes it will, the heterogeneity might get reduced by changing the summary measure. Same data, instead of risk ratio, take the risk difference. So that is one way, bypassing. Then encompassing. Sometimes you can do a random effects analysis from fixed effect to random. If you do, maybe it can compensate for a bit of heterogeneity. And this is interesting point. Explore it. Are there some subgroups where there's a heterogeneity is there, and when you combine everything, it is becoming heterogeneity is becoming large. Subgroup analysis. And then there's a concept called meta regression, you can collect different data of each study setup and regress. That's a fairly advanced concept, meta-regression, and ignore the heterogeneity, which is not recommended. Or if you want to resign, don't do any meta-analysis. Most important is this exploring the heterogeneity is the real charm, a bit of challenging task, because if you have not planned for it, you cannot do subgroup analysis, you cannot do meta-analysis. So foresee all the possible options and collect relevant data at the initial stage itself, so that you can do some subgroup analysis and meta-regression. You can explore why there is heterogeneity. Are there in some hidden subgroups where within them they are intra-group, they are homogeneous, but inter-group there is heterogeneity. So that type of a thing is very interesting, charming. Then there is a concept called publication bias, which is very, what I would say, personally, I have discussed with many people, including the Cochrane group. When I was in UK, I used to. But this is a very soft component. There is nothing called publication bias, if you ask me strictly. When there are no studies, how can you say there is publication bias? What do you have? So anyway, for completeness sake, we will see this publication bias arises when published studies are included in the meta-analysis that you have included. They do not represent all studies on the topic under consideration. It's a very idealistic, hypothetical, utopian concept. When it is not published, you are presuming that somebody has done but not published. What evidence do you have to presume that somebody has done but not published? We don't have any answer for it. This is what So it's a very dicey or a very soft concept, I would say. So what are the sources for this publication bias? Because generally we agree with all these concepts, because studies with statistically significant or positive results are more likely to be published. So publication bias. They are published rapidly, so time lag bias. Published in English, this is a language bias. Published in more than once, some part here, some part by adding. You can see in a long ongoing trial, you will have interim results, then final results, like that, published more than once, multiple publication bias. And naturally bigger studies with positive results cited by others, so citation bias. Therefore, positive studies are easier to find and have a higher chance of getting included in a meta-analysis than those with a non-significant result. This is a fact, no doubt, but we don't know this, how much is, these are all presumption. I'm not very sure how can anybody ever prove that because of negative result, the study could not be published, and how many such studies, we don't know. This is a very dicey concept. So how do you detect this publication bias? The visual diagrammatic way is what is called as funnel plot. And there are some statistical methods. Usually people suggest more than one method. There are 3 methods, but statistical one definitely preferred, and we will see. Funnel plot is a simple scatter diagram of the treatment effect on horizontal axis versus some measure of the study's precision on the vertical axis. We will just see this. This vertical axis is what is the precision, and we know that the measure of a precision is the standard error, and sample size or weight are also used, but standard error indirectly depends on sample size. So the more the sample size, smaller the standard error. Smaller the sample size, larger the standard error. So most often we use the standard error as the precision. So the smaller the confidence interval, the more precise is the study, the result, and further up in the study space, because we are starting from 0 on the top to you're coming down, so inverted. So the studies that have very small standard error will figure somewhere on the top, somewhere here. The studies with large standard error or small sample size will figure at the bottom, that is on the vertical axis. When you come to the horizontal axis, it is the treatment effect itself. It could be odds ratio on a log scale. So you will have 0.012, 100, and you take in log scale because the difference between 0.1 to 1 is same as 1 to 10 or 10 to 100, doubling distance. And when you plot this point estimate from each study is then plotted, and a vertical line is added where the pooled estimate is there, like here, this is the pooled estimate. Now, a particular study, effect size is this. The standard error is that effect size is somewhere here. So if you show the smaller studies will fall on the bottom towards the base or x-axis, and those studies with high precision will be on the top. So the shape appears to be an inverted funnel. So we would expect less precise studies with fewer participants and events to be more affected by the play of chance. So more widely scattered about the pooled estimate, that is towards this area. And big studies with more events, expect them to be closer to the pooled estimate, and the estimate being high, they will be at the top of the graph. So making a triangular shape or inverted funnel. So this is how, this is what is called as a funnel plot. And if the dots, the points are falling in a symmetrical manner, not missing in some area or overcrowded in another area, one area, is an indication what is called as there is publication bias, which is a very what I would say, difficult to understand or even accept, because we are presuming that it is, because it is dots are missing, some studies are missing. We don't know, there is no way of verifying that, but this is what is the funnel plot is all about. So sorry, okay. So, and there are another two methods, statistical methods, which we can see in the software. They will straight away give what is the amount of bias and its p-value straight away. So that's fairly easy. And generally for bias, people expect to quote one statistical and one diagrammatic like this. So, and based on that, you conclude whether a publication bias is there, significant and not, or type of things. Okay, so how to deal with the bias? So report the evidence of bias as it is. Again, consider sensitivity analysis. Bias and heterogeneity, more or less same approach, you know. So sensitivity analysis, whether the result is robust to reasonable assumptions about the effect of bias. You may say one outlier is there, if you remove, can the bias be eliminated? Or heterogeneity, what if the heterogeneity is coming down automatically, bias also is likely to come down. Consider exclusion of some studies of doubtful quality. This is what I mentioned, the assessing the quality of the study. So if you have not collected that, there is no question of, or there is no possibility of doing this at this stage. So you have to plan ahead at the data collection itself, some relevant data about the study quality, setting, type of things should be planned in the very beginning itself. And some sensitivity analysis show that a review's conclusion could be seriously affected by bias. Then consider recommending to ignore some or all evidence to date. Because if your conclusions hinge on a particular one study or this thing, but it is well planned and very widely accepted type of a thing, then you will have to consider whether ignore the evidence to date or recommending further evidence required, further studies required, and so on and so forth. Okay, then as you have consort guidelines for reporting clinical trials, so are some guidelines to how to present a systematic review and meta-analysis. They're all called PRISMA guidelines. This is the PRISMA statement you can download from this. PRISMA statement.org. then that's enough, I think, because I just wanted to sensitize you what is a systematic review and meta-analysis, because there are so many further, it's a fastly, increasing area of analytic statistical analysis, this meta-analysis. So many concepts are coming, as for example, heterogeneity, weight calculation, study weight itself calculation. There are various ways. There is individual patient data meta-analysis, there's network meta-analysis. If you are comparing treatment A to B and another trial A to C and another trial B to C, then you can combine them and see what you call A to B, A to C, B to C. These are called what's called network meta-analysis. That's a more recent version and more this is an ever increasing topic, meta-analysis. So those things interested people can, read literature and practice and interact with the people who have been exposed to. So to summarize, a review of the topic is a necessity for any trial or research investigation. Traditional reviews have many drawbacks. Systematic reviews are more scientific and objective. Meta-analysis is the statistical part of the systematic reviews. And the meta-analysis yields a weighted estimate of the effect as the overall estimate. And these weighting procedures depend on the heterogeneity of the included studies. Forest plots and statistical tests help to assess the heterogeneity and to know appropriate weighing procedure. And purpose of meta-analysis also includes to explain the heterogeneity among studies. Subgroup analysis and meta-regression help in explaining heterogeneity. Publication bias is the single most important drawback of meta-analysis. Funnel plot and statistical tests help in assessing publication bias, and results of a meta-analysis should be examined for robustness. How sensitive are these? For one, is it the entire overall effect is hijacked by one influential large study? So that sort of a thing, what we call robustness or sensitivity. And if you want to see this wonderful resource, www.cochrane-net.org. This is a very good book, Systematic Reviews in Healthcare, Meta-Analysis in Context, Egger and Dave Smith, Altman, DMJ Books. This is a wonderful book. This, whatever I know, I read from this book only. And then other, this Dakin and Dickerson and Schreier, DMJ, Higgins and Thompson. These are the sources that you can see. As again, two more sources. So that's all I have. And now if you have any questions or this thing, we will be trying to take care of. Yes, any questions, any doubts?
Thank you so much, sir. That was really useful. I'm Nishad. I'm from Jipmer. I have a
Nishad, you are our neonatologist.
Yeah. We met during the Gottlang surfactant study.
Yeah.
Right. Sir, I have a simple question. What goes on the right side of the x-axis if you are doing a meta-analysis of RCTs? Does it have to be the intervention or the control, or is it just in the order of the odds ratio? Like it goes from a lower number to a higher number in the x-axis?
X-axis is in
the forest plot. Sorry.
In the forest plot.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the observed result. Observed effect size.
But we often write favors intervention, favors
that
control.
You can add depending on your outcome is a positive outcome, more the magnitude better, that type of a thing. To make it clear, you can add favors outcome, favors that.
Right.
So,
but by convention it is only in the increasing order of odds ratio or relative risk, right? So like from the smaller numbers on the left side, the higher numbers on the right side, like odds ratio of 0.1 would be on the left side.
Obviously, because this is an increasing scale, no? You see 0.1 on a log scale, odds ratio is very small, risk ratio is very small.
Right.
Isn't
that
it?
would be on the left side. And
yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
So this is the higher the magnitude, towards the right, more right to the box and the individual study representation will be.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
The other question was a little more. I had some trouble understanding, sir. So when we like the data you showed was from this data, for example, is from a systematic review of observational studies, not RCTs.
Not RCD. Yeah. But the
So
concept remains
here,
same. Yeah.
yeah. So when you have a large single well-conducted cohort study, they would have given, for example, the adjusted relative risk, adjusted odds ratio or relative risk from after adjusting for confounders in using some regression technique.
Yeah.
But when you put it in meta-analysis, you have a pooled value, but it is unadjusted.
Yeah.
So sometimes it becomes hard to judge. If they are in opposite directions, it becomes hard to judge which is more reliable. The results, adjusted results from a single well-conducted cohort study, or the unadjusted pooled value from a meta-analysis. So is this where meta-regression comes in? Is that where we use it?
No.
Okay.
Let me make it clear. Meta-analysis always uses unadjusted data.
Yeah.
Period. You cannot do a meta-analysis adjusted. You are deliberately introducing heterogeneity. So and if you talk of adjustment, somebody adjusts for 3 things. Somebody adjusts out of the 3, 2 at the inclusion criteria, 1 in the analysis. Somebody has not adjusted. So this is why this is where the heterogeneity concept comes, and meta-analysis is always done with unadjusted data. There is no meta-analysis done on adjusted odds ratios, adjusted risk ratios type of thing, even in a trial or this thing. So now what you are saying, meta-regression is the study characteristics. You can, every characteristic of the study or setup can be used as a predictor in the regression, and then see whether the heterogeneity can be explained because of these variations in the attributes of the study. So adjustment can be, but adjustment value you have not used for meta-analysis, whether it's adjusted or not, adjusted for what, doesn't come in meta-regression also, because the meta-analysis is always unadjusted data.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So meta-regression has nothing to do with adjustment type of things.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for this wonderful and simple to understand presentation. I have 2 points. One is a question, and one is I want to further confirm whether I understood it correctly. That when we are selecting studies, then from those studies we have to take only the bivariate analysis result, not the multivariate analysis result when we pull in the meta-analysis.
Yeah, man. Let me. It's not. Don't say multivariate, bivariate. It is raw as unadjusted analysis. Let's say that. What you mean is same. I agree, but I am putting it as unadjusted, crude odds ratios,
right,
crude risk
and
ratio.
so, sir, if some study, because I am of late finding studies which give the unadjusted odds ratio, but somehow they don't give the they give the adjusted odds ratio, but they don't give the unadjusted odds ratio.
That is the
so we have to exclude that. We can't use that data.
You can communicate with the authors and get the data.
Right.
And sometimes, they will be describing out of so many enrolled in the case group, we had an intervention group, so many had responded. They would have described somewhere hidden. That's where the laborious aspect comes. Data collection is the most laborious part of a systematic review. As I said, meta-analysis is simply computer does. Somebody brings the Excel file, you plug in and execute a command, you get the output. But that's not all. Actual work starts well before in the planning and laborious part of data collection and all. It will be there. At best, you can correspond with the authors and get the data.
Yes. Okay. Thank you,
Yeah.
sir. And one query about this random effects and analysis, like it pops up many times in meta-analysis. I think you in your presentation also mentioned about it. So can you help us understand some simple terms like what is random effect analysis in meta-analysis? And is
Okay.
there something like fixed effect analysis in meta-analysis?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll tell you, what is your specialization? Which the
Yes,
specialty?
I'm in community medicine, sir.
Community medicine. Okay. Another way, somebody asked me in microbiology once, if you are using some kits, let's say any kit, there are different kits, different companies for the same thing, or a diagnosis of a particular condition, you have different kits. Do you think all kits are equally effective?
No.
No. So you accept at that stage, no, I cannot presume there is a fixed effect for all the kits in their efficacy detecting. So you are accepting that all are not same. So same is the concept here. I know I'm assessing the efficacy of a particular treatment against this, but I'm sure it is not same all over the world. It depends on the patient profile, the background immunity, background condition, the type of subjects I choose. Okay, the type of, if it is, for example, it also involves about the health awareness and health consciousness of the people. But in illiterate societies, that component is very weak. So you cannot expect similar effect across the studies. So you say that I know I'm not assuming one common effect. This particular study, Adams, is from, let's say, Brazil. It has its own overall effect. Okay, it is its own distribution, and this is a representative of that group. And if the CBI is from, let's say, Middle East, you presume that Middle East studies, this is a representative of the study from that population. And between the two, the earlier one and this one and this, there is heterogeneity. You are accepting that.
Yes.
In a fixed effect, you presume the difference between these two is purely chance.
Okay.
That is what is the essential difference.
Okay.
And
so,
yeah, please carry on.
so sorry, sir. Yeah. So can I say that by default, like we have to use random effect analysis in meta-analysis?
Most often, yes. Not by default. By default, Stata does fixed effects.
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, I agree.
So
mostly
most
it
often,
will be like that.
this is a realistic, more realistic scenario.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's all from my side. Thank you, Dr. Ashish. Thank you, sir.
So just as for any analysis, an organized data file is necessary. So is for meta-analysis also. Every study is included in your meta-analysis shown in one row. The main data items should be the numerator, denominator in each group arm. In addition, some details like the authors, journal, year, and other data that you think may be relevant for some subgroup analysis, stratified, sensitivity type of things, you can also be that they also could be part of your data file. Then sorry, okay. Okay, so this is the typical how a data file looks like. It's like a Excel sheet. You have a serial number, you have the author, year, country, how many events are there in the treated group, how many events are there in the, how many are non-events are normal in the treated group, how many events are there in the control, and how many normal in the control group, whether blinding was there or not, like that, this is the typical, you can extend it depending on the apprehensions or doubts you have in mind. At the end, I may need to stratify on this. If you think, well, you can do that in the initial itself. But if you have not done at this stage, coming back and collecting again, attempting to collect is a very stupendous task. So you should have this type doubts and what you plan to do, subgroups and sensitivity type of things you should have initially in your mind and plan accordingly for the data collection. Okay, so the main command for meta-analysis data is what is metan. Okay, and this has, you can have 4 arguments, 3 arguments, or 2 arguments for this command. 4 can be the number of events and non-events in test arm and control arm. Okay, this is one way of giving the input. If you have the effect estimate followed by the 95% confidence limit, then you have 3 arguments. The simply effect estimate and its standard error. This is a very, if you are simply saying a proportion, a prevalence you're doing, then it is a 30% prevalence with its standard error 5%. Like that, you know, it is that's how the 3 options are given for different types of effects, whether it could be a ratio measure or this one a risk difference, for example, could be an effect estimate is a risk difference and its standard error. So, for example, metan log RR and SE log RR, we are using this, or metan log RR, lower limit of the log RR, upper limit confidence interval, or metan treatment event, treatment normal, control event, control normal. So this is the basic command which goes with 2, 3, or 4 arguments. Then you need to tell Stata that some more information depending on the number of arguments. Let's take the simplest 4 arguments. Whether your effect estimate is, when you are saying it's risk ratio or odds ratio, you will have to say so that the graph it will come, the combined the risk ratio, that labeling will be coming if you mention what you are giving. Okay, so command looks like metan, you say this is preeclampsia cases, preeclampsia normal. I am referring to the example that I have sent you, control cases, control normal, and then I am saying RR. I'm saying I'm using risk ratio. I'm just telling that system. Okay. Now I can add labels to each study because you have, this is only, now you don't have, because you did not tell Stata to say which study, which estimate refers to which study. So you want to add that. So you can add labels to each study displayed by adding metan, the same command, RR, label. Labels are name, this is a reserved word. Nameware is what is called author in your data file. Like for example, yeah, this author, this particular column will be the name where you link this. So that now the first plot will come, every study estimate is shown against that particular author. Okay, then if you execute this command, system gives a tabular summary of the studies along with the weight given for each study, and a weighted pooled estimate also will be there. And then, as we discussed earlier, a measure of heterogeneity along with significance p-value are shown. And this graphical presentation is a forest plot is also created. The same tabular presentation in a graphical manner, that is a forest plot is created. And then you can store this graph by a command called graph export, my meta-analysis. It is a TIFF file you want to save it as a JPEG, you can save as you like. And there are 3-4 options. Usually TIFF is the one people prefer. So by this command, you can save your forest plot. And then you can see, once if you understand the basic command, then there are, you have so many options to beautify and, look it more appealing. You can show all your kalakari skills, You need to have patience, and that's it. There is nothing beyond that. You can add then font size, x-axis label, tick, all this. A typical command looks like metan, cases, normal, control cases, control normal, random effects, x label. I want 0.1, 1, 10, 50, depending on my estimates in my data set. Maximum is 50. I don't need to put it 100 max. Then I will say tick, where the tick mark should be. I force it has to be here. And I give the author, and effect I will give as a risk ratio, a text size, so that it looks a bit neat, and text size 140, 150, whatever you want, depending on the number of studies and the width of the confidence intervals. You can see that, and maximum size you can, whatever possible, you can change and see how it coming, and then the best possible you can, final one you can take. And the system default is fixed effects. If there is a heterogeneity, assumption of fixed is not tenable, so random effects is more appropriate. So that's how you add a word random as the command here, so that it does the. And then you can tell Stata that you need a random by adding the command random, and this is what I already said. This is, it does the bulk of what is called the whole of meta-analysis bulk is done. But then if you are lucky, and if there is no heterogeneity, there ends the almost your exercise of meta-analysis is over. But most often you will have heterogeneity, and then you need to do some exploration why there is a heterogeneity. Or is there any publication bias type of things, This bias, diagrammatically, you need, as I said, the funnel plot. To assess bias, you need not the numbers. This is the limitation of Stata. You need to have the estimate and its standard error. That's the bias command uses only 2 arguments. It doesn't take 4 arguments, 3 arguments. It requires the estimate and standard error, nothing. So you need to have this, either you generate through commands through the program in your do file, or have them calculated earlier and keep in Excel. Either way, the more, whichever is you feel comfortable, you can opt for it. As I said, you can generate these through commands, or have them in the data file itself entered in the very beginning. And if you have them in the data file, meta funnel, log, and this again, this meta funnel will be using only log one, not the usual RR or odds ratio. You have to give in log terms, log RR and SE of log RR. This is what is meta funnel. As we have discussed, it will generate the plot, funnel plot, and the funnel plot is created. And again, you can save it through graph export command. Then more formal way of bias assessment is through what is called statistical means. Then this is what is called meta bias. It does, there are 2 methods. One is Egger, and there is another, I forgot. It will be seen in the output, you can see that. And it also generates a graph. This graph, the philosophy behind this is, when you do a regression between the effect size and the I think standard error, the regression line should pass through the origin and make a 45-degree line. If the intercept is not in the origin, the difference between origin, that 0 center point, and the intercept is what is called bias. And that bias is statistically, you can test whether it is statistically significant or not. That is what is the meta bias command executes for us. So, but if you want a detailed learning of meta-analysis through Stata, Stata Press, there is a book, Meta-Analysis in Stata, Stern, Newton, and Cox. Is a wonderful book for if you want to really have a grip on meta-analysis using Stata. This book is a must. So this is my data file. I have the serial number, I have the author, I have the total in the preeclampsia group, and out of that, how many cases are there, how many normals are there. I have the control total, I have control cases and control normal. I have deliberately added risk ratio, log risk ratio, standard error. Okay, this has come 2 times, so I can remove that, not a problem. Okay, so you simply copy this, you choose this data file. You can do the through commands and import all that. Simply copy this. Go to Stata. Yeah. So window, data editor. Yeah, my first line is my variable names. First line is not data. So choose first line is variable. So my data has come on into this data. Now you close the screen. Data has come into Stata. You can see these are your variables. The variable names are here. You can see name, serial number is the first variable, author is the second variable, and total in preeclampsia group, cases in preeclampsia, normals in preeclampsia group, total in the control, cases in the control, normal in the control, and this is the risk ratio, log risk ratio, standard error of the log risk ratio. These are the variables that you have. It's clear? It has come?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now I'm not going to the data file. I'm not going to use the data file, do file.
Okay.
So what is the command that we have for this thing? Can anybody help me? I'll type. The metan is the command for us.
Okay.
Okay. Then prompt me so that I will type what I should have.
So it was too long to remember. Maybe you
No.
could
First,
say
let
it
us
again.
let us take the first 4 arguments. What are they?
PE underscore cases.
P underscore cases. Click on that. It comes here.
Yeah. Then PE underscore normal.
Right. Click.
Control underscore cases and control underscore normal.
Okay.
Okay.
Enter. What happens? Just see. Well, there is nothing. Nobody is going to prosecute you if something goes wrong. Just enter. What happens? You just see. Yeah.
So we seem to have got a pooled RR.
Sorry?
So there
Yeah.
all the 13 studies are there
Ah.
with the independent relative risk.
What is the first line? No. Show me what. Tell me what is the first line indicating study 1.
Yeah. The
How much?
RR is 6.6 with a 95% CI of 4.3 to 10.2. Weight of the study is 2.4.
4%, right? And the last line, you see this. This is Mantel-Hansel pooled risk ratio.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is Mantel-Hansel pooled risk ratio. And how much the pooled risk ratio is how much? 2.7. Right. But you don't have what is study 1. You don't have the label here. Okay. So go back to the command screen. Okay.
Right.
Press page up.
Okay.
You have the previous command again on display. Okay. Okay.
Right. Sir?
Now, now what is the addition? Suppose you want to have the study name here, what we said.
Author.
But author, no, but what is that particular part? Label, something we said. You have to, in the PowerPoint we have mentioned. what we said is this one, labels. Label, this is the part. Label, name var equal to author. Okay. So you paste this in the data. This command, label is a reserved word, name var is a reserved word, author is the name that we have given. So if you give this, has everybody reached this stage?
Yes, I think we can go ahead.
Yeah, enter.
We have.
So the same earlier table with now you have the study labels. That's it. That now 6.6 refers to Adams 1961. Yeah. Okay, Epstein 1964. 12.55 refers to Epstein 1964. Okay.
Right, sir.
Yeah. Now go back to the command screen, page up. Now this is Mantel-Hansel method. So say random, add random.
This will give the random effects model. Now.
Yes. Now you see random effects model.
The pooled RR has changed.
Changed, absolutely. See, that's the dynamics. Yeah, and if you are keen, you can go back to the previous screen and see the weights for the same study. Let's, for example, go to back to your screen. Adams is given 12.72 random effects. Okay, fixed effects you see. There's a lot of difference. Yeah, it is 2.4% Adams. And Epstein has only 1.06. It is 9.3. Yeah. So this is the effect of what you call the random effects, which is that's how it is the random, and that's how even the pooled effect has changed. And now heterogeneity chi-square is this, and I-square is becoming 78 with its p-value is the summary pooled estimate is statistically significant with I-square is so much, and which is heterogeneity is also significant statistically. But practically we will interpret up to 50 is not considered to be very heterogeneous. 78 is moderately heterogeneous. So,
when we are applying the random effects, so it means that some of the studies are getting a greater weight, but the total remains 100%.
Oh,
so
yes. Yeah.
With some studies which have got weight reduction also.
Oh, yes. That's what I said. No? A larger study which got a larger weight in the fixed effects will get a relatively smaller weight in random effects. And a smaller study which got smaller weight in the fixed effect analysis will get slightly relatively larger weight in the random effects.
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, and you already have the graph also created. You can see the stata graphs also will be there. This is the graph. Already forest plot is created.
Sir, I have one question. It may
Yeah.
may sound very silly to you, but sir, when we give the command, we are not putting in after metan. We have not put in the RR anywhere. So these
I'm coming. We will come to that. You see
the individual RRs which have been tabulated. These have been calculated, or have these been taken from the columns we had created?
No. You have not fed it. You gave to the command. You have not given RR.
No, we haven't.
You have only given preeclampsia cases, preeclampsia normals. Okay, So it has, by default, if you give 4 arguments, it takes the risk ratio data.
Okay. When will it decide to take an odds ratio instead of risk ratio, sir?
You will have to, you have to give the ADBC, you have to give, and then say that it is a odds ratio.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do that. It's a,
This will always calculate the RR, this command.
by default, yes, 4 arguments, by default, it does the risk ratio.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so the plot is also created, forest plot is also created. You can see that. Now you want to, this graph is so long as on display. Now you can give the command that graph export, okay, say my meta-analysis, if, just say, and say replace. So you want to enhance the fonts and all, as I said, you can, the labeling points, x-axis labels, ticks and all that you can add, as we have seen. Just page up the command and go on adding, all your commands are already there. Page up will go on giving you the previous commands that it is getting logged somewhere. So now you add x-axis label, x-axis ticks, and all those things you can add here, font size, box shade, all that can be given. And your meta-analysis, the forest plot beautification can be done, because the table won't change. This table remains same. Only change is whatever you add, that beautification will be coming for this graph. That you can make it a slightly bigger font, and you can, you see, for example, this space is not used. So by making it towards left, you can make it, this font can be slightly big, you can make it bigger, and so that the visibility is enhanced. All those things with font size and can be done. So you have done the meta-analysis. Right now, you have got an R square of I square of 78%. Now, if you think it is too much, you need to explore why it is. For example, let us say this is the, I think this is the study is the culprit for the library. If you say is, in fact, if you see this data, this study library, in fact, is, if you go back to the data, original data Excel, there are 0 cases here in the control arm. So what meta-analysis while doing, people do is, you don't exclude such a study, you replace it with a small number, and so that otherwise you cannot calculate the risk ratio. So one way is, you maybe this is the being the smallest, or this, if you exclude this, the heterogeneity might come down, because these are anyway very small studies, weights being 3% and 2%. If you remove, what happens? This is one way of exploring the heterogeneity, why there is heterogeneity. Okay, this type you can go on doing. Okay, so is that clear what I'm trying to say?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Broadly, you have finished the meta-analysis part. The forest plot and the summary table and all. Okay. Now we want to explore, let's say, the bias.
Command, yeah.
Yeah. So yes, can anybody help me? What is the command for meta? This thing, I'll just type meta funnel. Here you require only log RR and SCRR. I told you that. You cannot use the actual numbers. You have to use the log RR and SC of log RR. Then only it helps you. Yeah. So this is what it is. Everybody could do this up to
So
this.
how would you interpret this funnel? Would you say that this is a symmetrical funnel or
They say this is a, you see, the whole concept of funnel plot itself is very soft, and I would say I don't agree with this. In fact, I argued with BMJ editor once. I can tell you, you know, it is a very flimsy concept to say that whatever is missing this area is because of unpublished studies. How do you know it is the study was not done, so could not be published, or done and could not be published? How do we know that? How do you ever say that?
that is fine, but supposing we have this funnel.
Yeah, so
screen,
it is
and if
fairly, you
you
can say
interpret-
that, yeah, you can see here, these two are somewhat one
Outlier.
can flag outlier, because large, you have large effect with large standard error, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so
Small
this
standard error, sir.
large standard error with large effect, that means bigger, very large sample size. I mean, no, small sample size and large effect. Small sample size, large effect,
Right.
large standard error. Because it is stopped, the effect size is large. It is coming towards the log RR is between 2 and 3, so it is effect size is large. Because the standard error is small, so it is
Towards zero.
yeah, it should have ideally come within the funnel, this area, towards closer to the pooled this thing. But it is, so maybe one should see who are these two studies, and some further looking into the study aspects, specifics type of thing. One
And
should
so
look
from
into.
this graph, how do I make out which are those two studies?
You can, you have to see, this is, you need to look into the data with whose log RR is more than 2, and standard error is less than 0.5. Okay, so go back and see the log RR is more than 2, standard error, for example, this one, Epstein. Say, this is 1, and this is the one. So serial number 10 and serial number 2 are the culprits. That's from the, yeah. So you can see this is the log RR is more than 2 from here, and the standard error log of standard log RR as standard error is below 0.5, roughly 0.2 and 0.4. So you can, pick like that, and then examine whether the data collection is appropriate. Have you by abstraction there is error, or some specific aspects of the study which may be deviation, or maybe if you exclude what happens, type of things, you need to develop understanding by looking more details. So unless you have an extreme, like all dots falling in only one side, okay, or all falling only in one, clustering in one place, so it is fairly, because it's not a very well-defined concept, so fairly one will interpret, yes, this is, there is no publication bias. So, and the same further you can examine by statistical means. Okay, what is the command? Anybody help me?
Meta bias.
Yes, meta bias, same thing, the same command. Instead of meta funnel, I would say meta bias. That's it. So its Beck's test is 1, which is says the p-value is not significant. There is another Egger's test, which is the bias is the intercept. So if you add, what is this intercept? You can just say graph Egger. If you add, yeah, this is the same Egger's data. You see, this is, if there is no bias, this line should have a 45-degree line starting from this origin. So there is intercept from 0 to this. This is bias, and its confidence interval is what is shown in your tabular form. Bias is 1.24, and it is p-value 0.11, not significant. So generally people prefer, because publishers also, editor also wants to save the space. So funnel plot, if it is not very attractive, people don't show funnel plot. People just give, because it will save, and it is also not very, most often it is not very attractive to have very symmetric bell, you know. So people prefer.
Probably it is also presumed that if the funnel plot was skewed, then obviously the meta-analysis would not have been done.
No.
If the meta-analysis is being published,
I don't like to believe that, because there are meta-analysis. For example, pneumococcal conjugate vaccine. Meta-analysis is done on 2 studies. Now you do a funnel plot. Definitely it will be so much area of the funnel plot is, you mean to say studies are, it is publication bias?
yeah, obviously if there are 2 studies, then
That is exactly I'm telling. That is exactly I'm telling. See, you have to see the context, and so it is a very loose concept. Vivek, I would say 2001 or 2. Richard Horton said, I discussed this. I'm telling you, in Jhansi, he came down all the way from UK, and in Jhansi we had a workshop, and so these are, you have to be very practical, and don't be rigid in just going by textbooks and all. You have to use you have, after some time, you have your own understanding of your specialty. How many studies are done? Is it a study that everybody does every day to say that this area is missing, so there is publication bias? So you have to, see the context in your own specialty and type of things. So, but people generally go by publications and all, go by the statistical tests as far as bias is concerned.
Sure. Yep.
So I think this is what further, if you want to do, as I said, subgroup analysis. If, for example, this preeclampsia versus hypertension, we know hypertension is related to age. So if the study is what is the average age, if somebody has included primary, somebody has included multi-para women and all, you can go on. It's a matter of, it's open for your exploration further. You can say, let me take only primary women, and which tend to be younger women. So the real association, if there is preeclampsia versus hypertension, you can exclude studies including multiparous women and see those studies which have been done only on primary. Then again, that is again number of studies. If you get only 1 such study or 2 studies, no point in doing subgroup analysis further. So it is a lot of exploration, practical, feasibility of that, and then experimenting and coming out with the result. So it is a very, what I would say, intensive, labor-intensive exercises, which require supportive data for you, and then one should have the patience to explore.
Sir, can
Ah.
we use the SPSS software for meta-analysis and all these tests?
I am not sure SPSS has this module.
Okay.
So you will have to see if there is this meta-analysis module.
No,
Uh,
it doesn't seem to give, sir.
Yeah, I don't think. Yes. So I'm not sure, but these days all softwares are more or less equal. But Stata has certain advantages because it gives very succinct output with small. You just give what you want. Whereas SPSS gives whether you ask or not. For a simple t-test, it will give 4 pages output. Whereas Stata gives you 1/3 of a page output for a t-test. It will give what you want. That's it. Unnecessarily giving, that's the philosophy. SPSS philosophy is slightly different, but for practical purposes, statistical analysis, both are equally good. Regressions, especially model building, Stata is universally accepted to be better than SPSS or any software for
Right.
model building.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Meta-analysis, you have to see whether the module is there or not. Yes.
Thank you, sir, for
Thank you.
this wonderful session. And I'm sure participants will be able to view the recording and will be able to see if there are any lingering doubts. And once again, thank you to all the participants for having joined us and been with us for the last 6 weeks.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure to talking to you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you so much. Thank you.